Hey, welcome to Dan's Model Works, and this week we're looking at the Mack DM600 Tractor, and it's by MPC, and it's in 1/25th scale. And I think most people are familiar with the classic Mack trucks, and the DM is a member of the Mack R family. The Mack R family basically came out in 1966, and it replaced the Mack Model B, and they basically were in production until 2005. So a fairly long production run, although the last few years, the actual nose, the bonnet was different. The hood had slightly different styling. You might be wondering, okay, a Mack Model R, a Mack DM, what's the difference? A Mack Model R, the cab was centered in the middle of the truck, and usually the hood would be a little bit longer. Now, in many jurisdictions and in many applications, you want to keep your truck as short as possible. So what Mack did is they offered the U, which was the regular version, and the DM, which was a heavy-duty, more of a construction version. And what they did is they shoved the engine back into the cab, so it had a larger doghouse intruding into the cab. Well, as you can see, it's a very narrow cab anyway, so that would pretty much wipe out any legroom that the driver had. So Mack got around that by shoving the cab off to the left-hand side. That gave the driver full legroom. Now, I'm sure you can still sit in the passenger side, but I don't think it was particularly comfortable, not without having, the engine intruding that much into the space. As I mentioned, and this information comes from Wikipedia, might have a few errors in it. At any rate, in 1973, there was a small change made in the Mack R Series trucks. They changed the back of the cab a bit in order to give more space in the cab, and they changed the dashboard. Now, MPC's kit was tooled in 1972, so this probably represents the Mack truck before those changes were made. I don't know how noticeable they are, but at any rate, they did their tooling in 1972. In 1976, it was re-released, and it was more of a squarish box. It was part of the Ertl line by then. Of course, there was probably some different decals and things like that in it. In 1978, the movie Convoy came out. And of course, if you've seen the movie, you know that the main hero in the movie drove a Mack truck. It was black, it had a sleeper on it, and he called it the Rubber Duck. And it had a little butch-looking rubber duck replacing the Bulldog. And it also had a sleeper, and I'm pretty sure the cab was centered. I haven't gone and rewatched the movie, so I'm not sure. At any rate, this truck was re-released to represent the Rubber Duck. I don't know if they centered the cab. They would have had to go with a longer frame in order to get the sleeper on it. I do know that there's some companies out there, some aftermarket companies make resin parts so you can create the Rubber Duck. So maybe you're supposed to use this model and modify it into the Rubber Duck. I don't know. But at any rate, we haven't seen this kit out since the 1970s, I believe, at least according to ScaleMates. So this is actually a 2015 release. If you look on Round 2's catalog website, sometimes when you click on this, it says sold out, and sometimes it doesn't. So I don't know if Round 2 has any left. I know my hobby shop was able to order this from their supplier last December. So I'm thinking probably most of the wholesalers still have these in stock, and probably a lot of the mail order houses do as well. So why don't we take a look at this kit? We'll start off by looking at the box. All right, so if we look at this side, you can see we've got some drawings of the engine. It says it's got 6 plated wheels, 10 hollow tires, steerable front end, which is kind of nice. And, they show basically, I'm assuming that the hood flips forward. It isn't just set in place like the Ford Louisville. Certainly a lot of extra goodies and things like that. It says designed in the USA, so I'm not exactly sure where it was molded. Possibly in China, although MPC, or Round 2, has done some of the recent moldings in the US as well. We'll flip over the other side. We've got here, coming soon from MPC, a gravel trailer. Mack DM600, which is actually the Super Duty version of this. Gravel trailer, and then we've got a cement mixer as well. And this cement mixer, I believe, was released on some of their international kits as well. And this is funny. Presented for nostalgia only. Visit round2models.com for currently available kits. The strange thing about this is, you could argue, oh, well, they're just being cheap. You know, they should have designed another side panel. They haven't really saved themselves that much money by not changing this. Because as soon as you change even a single letter or character or line on a piece of artwork, you need to make new printing plates. And that's the expensive part. So they would have had to create new printing plates for this box just to put this for nostalgia only. So I think they probably really did keep it as originally released for the nostalgia purposes, really. Of course, if we look on the back, we have what Round 2 puts on a lot of their kits, which is a Sprue Map. And I like this. It gives you an idea of how many parts and the breakdown of the parts. And it also can twig you to, is this a re-release kit or is it a new kit? Because most newer kits are full perimeter moldings like this. Most manufacturers with new tooling don't go in for the sprues where it's more like a tree. But at any rate, let's get into the box and see what we got. So we've got our instructions. Take a look at those in a moment. We have the miniature box, for those of you who are into a little small version of your box. And you could say this is kind of a cheap extra and a little bit of a gimmick, but at least they are trying to give you some extra value. And once again, this requires a new printing plate. This is not cheap to run off. This requires actually 4 plates, black and 3 colors in order to make this. This bag here contains 2 chrome sprues. And we've got some black sprues here. This bag has our hood and our cab. This one has got some wheels and our engine and some fenders. We have a couple more black sprues, decals. We have our window glass. Finally, a big bag of wheels. Tires, sorry. We've also got some rubber hosing in there. Let's start by looking at the instructions. We've got a nice black and white picture of the original artwork from the front. We open it up, and we've got some details on the real truck, giving you the size of the engine and everything like that. We have this important, read this first. You're about to construct this model. Make sure you use your tools this way. Please don't eat the parts. So assembly starts with some of the suspension, and this is cool. I like these springs. Many years ago when I was a security guard, I worked at a trucking company, and they had lots of international, a few Fords, and then they brought in an older Mack truck. And I remember looking at the springs and thinking, they are really gnarly looking. You don't see springs like that on any other kinds of trucks other than Macks. So we have assembling the wheels, and you have to remove this center portion here, and more suspension construction. And here we've got making your steerable front axle, And the frame is old school. You have to put it together, the two sides plus the cross members, and installing your steering. Then we're getting into, this looks like the exhaust, and some of the fuel tank, and we've got air cleaner or air dryers and reservoirs and that sort of thing. And we've got putting the rear suspension onto the frame. This is something MPC usually does in their kits. Areas that have already been taken care of are kind of cross-hatched. Then we've got the engine. Oddly enough, you don't start with the engine. We've got the assembly of said engine, placing it in the chassis. We have assembly of the hood or the bonnet, putting the window glass in. Then we've got the air cleaner, and this has the really tall air cleaner. You probably could shorten it if you like. And then we've got assembly of the cab, and you can see there's a little bit of an indent there. We'll look at the part later. That shows how much the engine intrudes. Well, as a matter of fact, here we go. This is the doghouse that goes inside. So you can see a passenger does not have a whole lot of footroom. And then we've got final assembly of the cab. And then we've got a big radiator support holding the radiator in place. Oh, this is interesting. The Mack lettering gets applied in separate letters. That's kind of interesting. Putting the fenders on. And then we've got, a choice of bumpers. And of course, the fifth wheel. And then it shows putting some decals on. And then finally, some painting tips. All right, let's meet the parts. We'll start off with the clear parts, because that's what's in my hand. I'm not going to take them out of the bag. We've got a couple of small red parts here, and then we've got the windshield and the back window, side glass, and these appear to be the headlights. It's nice to see for a kit that's of this vintage that they didn't resort to the glass tent that fits up inside the cab. This is kind of nice. Hopefully they fit well. Moving on to the tires. Here's our bag of tires. And as I said before, they give you this rubber hose. I'm not sure what this is for. I didn't notice it in the instructions, but now to actually look at the tires, they are nice and soft. And if we get up close here, let's try to focus. You can see they are Goodyear tires, and lots and lots of print and detail on these. These are really, really nice looking tires. And the same detail is on the back. However, this center portion here needs to be cut out. And even though in the instructions it shows a spoked center section, this is all one piece. So I would imagine it's pretty thin around the perimeter, but you're still going to have to be careful. So that's a bit of a downer, is in order to get at these awesome looking great tires, it looks like there's going to be a lot of work. Although, since the detailing is on both sides, you could always say, okay, I screwed up while I was cutting this out and there's a little bit of a tear. This is going to be the outside that I actually, when I put it on the model. Might as well look at the chrome sprues since they're nearby. Now, Round True thoughtfully puts this piece of tissue paper between them. So there is an attempt to make sure that the parts are of high quality. Now, that's quite a bit of nasty flash. Mind you, it's up on the sprue itself. Here's our fifth wheel. And actually rather interesting, there's no channels cut in it. I don't know if older fifth wheels were completely smooth like this. Now there is two kind of bum marks here. Maybe that is the way fifth wheels from that era were made, because I know you need to have a little bit of a reservoir for the grease they put on there. Whatever parts these are, they've got the Mack logo. Let's get up close here. They have the Mack logo cast right into them, which is nice. And there's our fan right there. And these are our headlights. Interesting that the headlights, the actual glass parts, are cast right in. However, they give you some headlights in the clear sprue. Not sure what that's about. They give you a chrome steering wheel. It's a little strange. Bumper looks nice, and here's that grill guard there. I'm hoping that the furnace isn't making too much noise behind me here. And there's our gas pedal, clutch pedal, and and let's focus in here. We got MACK. So there's our lettering for the front of the hood, and of course it has old style spoked wheels, which is certainly appropriate. And this sprue here has our fuel tanks, and they are the square style. And I'm looking at these and I'm thinking, you know what? I think I might make a mold of these, just so that if I ever want a square fuel tank that's made with this tread plate, I'll have a mold of it, so I can cast one in resin at a later date, because they look cool. I like those. Here's our exhaust stack and the big meaty air cleaner. So the chrome parts look pretty good. I don't see much flash on them. And here's another nice bit right here. On the mirrors, you can see it actually is cast in. It says Mack as well. Now let's look at some of the other sprues here. This is one of the black sprues, obviously. We've got a front and back to the radiator, which is nice because you know you're going to get detail on both sides. And this is part of the rear suspension. There's a big meaty looking casting there. And these are some of your frame cross members. Got a couple of small sprues here. This one has, this might be the doghouse, and an accessory belt and part of the plumbing for the engine. And then we have the frame. And looks pretty good from this side. And uh-oh, this is not good. Can you see that warp? It's even worse on this side. So our chassis frame rails, which should be dead straight, are pretty warped. That's a little discouraging. It's certainly not a deal breaker. It's not something that you can't overcome. You could probably put it in really hot water or use a heat gun or something like that, or simply brute force would probably sort it out. But it is still a little discouraging. And here is our bucket right there. And it is a little unfortunate in that there aren't separate side panels. This being all black, it's hard to get a good view. You can see that there's detail engraved on the door panels, but it's just barely there. You might want a scratch build or a kit bash to add some in there. And we've got the mud flaps once again with the Mack trademark on there, including the Bulldog. And we have our dashboard. That looks pretty good. And the seats. Oh, that's cool. This, I'm assuming, is the driver's seat. And here's the passenger seat. Once again, they've got the Bulldog embroidered into it. That is neat. That's really cool. Move on to this white sprue, which has our engine in it. And it has an alternate bumper to the chrome one, which is kind of nice. And let's take a close look at it. It looks pretty good. We got a couple other small sprues. I have no idea what these parts are. I'm assuming they're going to be important someday. This actually looks like just the back end of one of the front fenders. And we got another couple parts on this sprue. This white sprue here has some more of the wheel parts, the backing parts, and it has two fenders to go over the drive wheels. Now, this is very common in Europe to use these, less common in North America, but there are some applications where you'll want to use these. You know, if you were going to maybe stretch the frame on this truck and make a a roll-off box truck that picks up dumpsters and things, you'd want to have these fenders. So that's a nice inclusion there. And we have our suspension details. We've got the rear differentials. And remember I mentioned about those springs? Aren't they gnarly looking? They look super cool. They are neat. And as well, look at a lot of the parts of the driveline. They say Mack on them. Now, Mack was known for producing a lot of its parts in-house that other manufacturers would simply buy from outside suppliers. So this is a nice detail having that molded in. Mack was a very, very proud company. Still is. And then we've got more parts for our wheels and plumbing for the engine. And here's our front suspension, the front axle. And now, drum roll please, we have the cab and the hood. Now, don't panic about these. These get removed. And it's basically MPC's way of making sure the cab is completely molded and gives a little bit of extra protection during shipping. And if we look at the firewall, get a good focus on that, there's a fair amount of detail on there. Lots of little wiring and stuff like that. That's pretty cool. This is a vent to allow fresh air into the driver. Then we'll look at the hood. And you can see just how short the hood is on this. This is actually, I believe, shorter than the hood on a short nose Louisville. And this is how it goes on. And then you can see the very characteristic cab offset of the Model U and DM. Very, very distinctive. And if you recall when we looked at the bucket, let's bring the bucket back, you can see how much the engine intrudes into the passenger compartment here. And how much legroom the driver would lose if it didn't have this offset cab arrangement. Cab is nicely molded. I just see some very small lines that you might want to sand off on it. And the hood, as you can see by these pins here, it does hinge. There's even a little bit of detail molded onto the inside of it. Let's try to catch that in the light. You see that there? Why is this not going? There we go. Having mentioned the offset, my brain can't accept it. There you go. That shows you the huge offset there is in this cab. So, there's all the parts. The only real concern I have quality-wise is the frames being bent, which is a little bit of a disappointment. It's not something that's fatal. It's not something that you can't overcome. So, question is, what am I going to do with this? Oh, there's so many things you could do with this. Like I said, you could stretch the frame and have it be a truck with a roll-off box. You could make a coal truck with it. But certainly dump trucks, construction equipment. You put a gooseneck behind this, that'd be cool as well. I think I need 2 or 3 more of these. So that does it for our look at the MPC re-release of their Mack DM600 Tractor. Looks to be a really nice kit. It was not nearly as expensive as I thought it was going to be. I was expecting a price approaching $90, 100 Canadian, and it was maybe just over 60 Canadian, so that's actually not too bad. There's a lot more kits that are way more expensive for what you're getting. So at any rate, as you can tell, I'm excited about this kit, and God only knows when I'm going to get around to building it. So until next time, thanks for watching Dan's Model Works, and keep on modeling.